Hello everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. I want you to give a very, very warm welcome to Dr. Kieran O'Keefe and Billy Roberts.
Actually, before we start, I do have one question for you.
Good.
That was, I'm going to start off softly, and then I'll go a bit more hardcore later on. But when you're giving your readings, you're interchanging between astrology, psychic, mediumship. How can you tell the difference?
Well, I can. I mean, I can. Because it's such a short show, and it's not the normal show, is it?
No.
We're sort of exploring different concepts. I thought I'd interject. We didn't plan this, by the way. The intention was for me to endeavour to demonstrate mediumship and do a little bit of the psychological astrology later on, but I decided not to do that because I don't like him to preempt the situation. So I thought he had something up his sleeve, which he probably did have, so I foiled him. Anyway.
So it's as simple as that.
That's it.
Okay. Got a couple of questions here. This is a question for me, I guess, the first one. I felt you were using NLP when you read the card with the wavy lines. Is this true? NLP, for people who don't know, is neuro-linguistic programming. You can find a lot of information about it on the net. And a large part of NLP is to do with reading people in terms of the direction of their eyes when they're telling you something. So if you ask somebody to imagine what their room would be like, if they painted it yellow, then their eyes would move in a particular direction. If you ask them to imagine the colour of their room as it is now, their eyes would move in another direction. Did I use NLP? No. Simple as that. I won't tell you how I did it though. And this is for Billy. How did Billy feel he was right when he didn't get recognition or didn't get connection from the audience, I think that says?
I don't understand that question. When it's wrong, isn't it? And a medium is only as good as the audience they work with. I'm not saying that it's a bad audience, it's a nice audience. But one of the messages I gave, I mean, I try and explain, because usually a show goes on for 2 hours, and I try to explain that if I'm speaking to somebody, it doesn't seem to be for them. If it is for you, put your hand up. And a lady did come to me in the break over certain information I gave to two sisters in the audience. Sometimes it sounds a bit of an excuse really, but sometimes messages can overlap. You know, you can get two kind of messages for one person, for different people rather, when I'm speaking to one person. So I didn't feel it was, well, I know it wasn't a brilliant demonstration. It was, is that what you want me to say?
Well, for you to say it wasn't a brilliant demonstration,
well, it wasn't.
Seems to me I'm quite happy with that. To say that. But then again, I was listening in the back. It's very difficult for me because I can't see people's reactions.
There was no mic in the audience for me.
I apologise for that.
And the other thing is, and I don't mean this, it's an audience with a difference, isn't it? We've got people who are inquiring, people who are very for spiritualism and mediums, and you've got the followers, the devotees of Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, who are mingled in the audience, who sort of look sideways at you and give discerning glances. I see them, I know them a mile off.
There's a couple, yeah.
But you know, it's a challenge, isn't it? There you go, that's
Yes, there was a good question here, unless you want to ask, here's a question for me, which is a tough one. Kieran, how does your science fit if you have a faith in God? And I think that's a general question because I don't have a faith in God. I was brought up Irish Roman Catholic, but denounced the faith as a teenager. So it's not an issue for me. But it's a good question in terms of this kind of science versus religion. How do you rectify the idea of science, especially when you're talking about something like evolution? And how do you rectify that with creationism, which is the Christian way of looking at things? Very, very difficult. There are scientists, I know a lot of them in North America, who are devout Catholics, Mormons even, a couple of colleagues, but they are scientists. And I find it very difficult how on earth they can rectify the two different ways of looking at the world. And that's what we're talking about for me. The way I look at the world is from a scientist perspective. It's all about science for me.
We've had this discussion before, haven't we, about beliefs and what you believe. And I always say that you've got to believe in something, because the one thing we've got in common is we're all going to die, so you might as well believe in something. But talking about religion, that was a joke, by the way, tongue-in-cheek. Talking about religion, mediumship doesn't have anything to do with religion, does it? You don't have to believe in a particular religion. Spiritualism does not have the monopoly upon religion. I was born as a medium. I think mediums are born, not made. Everybody has the potential. My mother was a medium, my grandmother was a medium, my aunt was a medium. So it wasn't something I chose to do. But as a child, I was very religious. I was brought up as a Catholic and believed totally in Jesus Christ, if you like. And as Kieran found himself being led away because of his scientific background, I suppose I was very radical and skeptical about religion. I always remember W.C. Fields reading the Bible on his deathbed, and he was trying to find loopholes, he said, which I thought was funny, and that's the way I feel about mediumship. So I'm a skeptical medium.
It's interesting what you say about you think everybody has the ability, or everybody has the potential. Are you saying everybody has the ability to be psychic or medium? Or?
Potentially. I think that I always say that before our primitive forebears evolved even the most rudimentary form of speech, they communicated their feelings and thoughts telepathically. And Maurice Maeterlinck, who was a 20th century dramatist, a mystic, he said we only evolved speech so that we could tell lies to our wives. Now, whether the latter is true or not, the fact remains that telepathy is a fact. It's a scientific fact, whether Kieran agrees or not. And mediumship is based on telepathy, albeit one of the minds is carnate and one incarnate. So it's communication, mind-to-mind communication.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, we don't agree on a lot. Right? And it's going to start to get a little bit passionate and hardcore and finger-pointing at some point. There is one thing that we do agree on, and that is in terms of testing mediums in a lab, in a laboratory. For me as a scientist, watching Billy work, watching Liam work, visiting spiritualist churches, seeing mediums operate one-to-one, there are too many other explanations for what's going on. Perhaps I'll even try a reading, because you said everybody has potential for ability. But there are too many other explanations for what's going on. It's not controlled enough. And so for me, I want mediums to come into the lab, and I'd like to control the environment so that if mediums are successful, if they're accurate in the laboratory, then there's no other explanation for it. But this is where we agree. Even if a medium comes out of my experiment in a laboratory and they are so accurate, there is no other explanation because of all the conditions, you can still only say that you've got evidence of paranormal communication. You can't distinguish between mediumship communication and telepathy, because at the end of the day, if somebody comes up with accurate information, how do you know it's accurate? That information has to be checked by somebody, either the client or the subject in the other room, or they have to ask somebody else. There has to be some verification. And so therefore, if there is such a thing as telepathy, if that process works, we cannot distinguish between telepathy and mediumship. I think that's the only bit that we agree on, is that how can you test a medium in the lab?
I really don't believe that mediumship can be tested in a laboratory. Psychic abilities such as basic telepathy and other psychic abilities can be put under the spotlight, like as you have done in Hope. But mediumship is different of mediumship altogether, because it's the most unreliable of all the abilities, spiritual abilities. It doesn't always work. And that sounds like an excuse from somebody who's been a professional medium for 30 years. But I know it doesn't always work. And in our book, I discuss about Professor Tutinsky in the early part of the 20th century, who was interested in paranormal experiences of children. and women, and he wanted to know why women were more psychic than men, which they are, to be honest. And he found out that the pineal gland, which was a walnut-shaped gland deep in the brain, was larger in a child than it is in the adult, and more developed in a female than it is in the male. And he believed that it was some sort of radar device that triggered off certain chemicals in the body when a person was having experiences of a paranormal nature. And we've discussed also temporal lobe epilepsy. Because a lot of the prophets throughout time, St. Paul, scientists believed that he was an epileptic. And epileptic sufferers, people who have a seizure, often have this blinding light. And they do have paranormal experiences.
I'm going to pick you up on one word you used there. When you said that this early 20th century scientist believed that the pineal gland was responsible for all this. If this was a scientist who actually thought that this was the case, then we'd have some sort of proof. Oh, and as far as I'm concerned, there isn't proof in terms of his. You're saying that he believed, so he was approaching it with some sort of bias. It wasn't like he built up some sort of theory or hypothesis.
He put his whole professional reputation on the line and was ridiculed by his peers for a 7-year study. And one of the things that he found out were in certain Tibetan monasteries, they used to, on some of the devotees of Buddhism, people who showed a propensity towards paranormal experiences were able to prophesy the future. One of the ways they used to precipitate it was to insert a fine stake and do a frontal lobotomy to, they believed, to manipulate the little gland here, which is, in yoga is called the ajna. It's what they call a chakra, which is responsible for intuition and perception. The people who survived this frontal lobotomy either went crazy or they died. So it's not recommended, ladies and gentlemen, but if you want to discuss it,
you can go over it now, would you? That wouldn't be a past psychology. I just do a frontal lobotomy to see if I can locate a chakra. I don't think that would pass. But let's go back a bit, because we're starting to get a lot more in depth, and I think we discussed this more in the book in terms of, the other part of the esoteric and maybe some of the more Eastern religions. But let's go back to the readings, in terms of the readings. I think there's a question here somebody asked about one of you, or at least about the readings. Can spirits communicate with you if they're from different nationalities speaking different languages?
It's a good point, that, isn't it? The excuse of mediums will say is it's a universal language, it's telepathy, it's a thought communication. I have known mediums, discarnate people, when I've worked in different countries, to communicate in their own language. This might sound a little bit strange, but as you would visit a medium, very often people in the spirit world have to visit an intermediary. And although it's a topic for ridicule, talking about spirit guides, and people make jokes about it, they do have a part to play in the manifestation of medium's consciousness. And often a medium is an intermediary, a spirit guide is an intermediary for the medium. So often information is passed on to this spirit guide who will pass it on to the medium's consciousness. I don't believe, and this is very medium to the audience, I do believe rather that clairvoyance is very rare. Clairaudience is even rarer. And although mediums often say, I see, very few of them see anything at all.
We should explain, clairvoyance is the mediumship ability to actually see spirit, see the person you're communicating with, but clairaudience is actually hearing it, and there's other forms.
And clairsentience, women more than men have. Most people have had the experience of being in the house alone, washing the dishes, husband's out, boyfriend's out, kids are in bed, and all of a sudden you become aware of the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, and you feel as though somebody's standing behind you. You know there's nobody there. You turn around, the room is empty. We've all had the experience. It's called clairsentience. Without going into the technicalities, the aura, which is also a scientific and a metaphysical fact, is a sort of a radar device that surrounds every living thing. And it's greater at the back than it is in the front, to enable you to sense things behind you. And a visually disabled person will have an aura shell. It will be as extensive in the front as it is in the back, to enable them to negotiate their route through the streets.
Have I got an aura?
You've got a beautiful aura.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Can I just go back to these readings? This was at the end of my talk. These were readings, remember, that I handed out for the psychic that was involved in Liverpool Hope and then Toulouse University. I'm just going to take them out. I'm not going to embarrass people by saying the names, but I'll take them out and actually comment or give the ratings that people put down. So we've got ratings from 1, which the reading doesn't describe me at all, up to 5, which describes me perfectly. So from 1 to 5, and people just circled how they thought their particular reading. So we've got, this is when you're kind of assessing how the psychic did. We've got a 3 there, a 4, a 5 describes me perfectly. Mary, who was actually Maria. A 3. Catherine, hold on. Oops. Sorry. It's all right. This is like, and the winner is 5 from Catherine. Jeff wasn't there. Mark wasn't there. Did we have James? No. And the last one here. 5. So we've got, what is it, a couple of 5s, 3 5s, 4s, and a couple of 3s.
And the point is
quite high. And the point is, well, what I'd like to do, I don't show all of the readings because we've got 10, but I'll show just one of them. And if the person who's reading this if you can just stand up, and then we can ask you about your specific reading. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight one of the reasons, if you remember what was written. Okay, so you can stand up. I don't know whose reading this was, but if you can stand up and this was your reading. Okay, so it wasn't just one. So everybody, right, okay, 1, 2, 3. This is the point. Thank you very much. Sit down. I do apologise for deceiving you. This wasn't actually from a psychic. This is what's called a Barnum reading. And everybody got the same reading. Everybody got this reading. And yet we had people rating it as 5. This describes me perfectly. And although you'll rarely, I mean, even Billy will say this, you'll rarely see readings like this in one-to-one. You do sometimes find it in astrology columns. The point I'm trying to make with this is that sometimes, and there may have been an element of this, I don't know if there's an element of this in your readings, sometimes if you think that a reading is specifically for you, you are going to think that it's more accurate than it actually is. You know, there's a lot of psychology going on. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that could have been going on even when you're given readings. People think, wow, he's giving me this reading, and they go, yes,
with
yes,
all
yes.
of you, I mean, when it's wrong for me, I will admit it, it's wrong. I'm not happy with the demonstration, given the time scale that we had.
Yeah.
When it works for me, it's quite specific. If anybody's ever seen me work before, it can be specific. And there are a lot of generalities, giving vague messages to people, and it does happen. Unfortunately, this is mediumship. If you're doing a demonstration, you've got to, what mediums call, when you work on a stage, use fillers. Little things to fill in the spaces, because mediumship is inconsistent. And I'm not talking about, do you know the name John and all these
They did actually say that.
Of course I did.
Yeah.
I'm the first one to admit it.
Yeah.
I never feel happy when it works like that, but when it works well, it's brilliant. But I've got to mention something here.
Oh, yeah.
So, somebody wrote a message.
So
they tell my 2 brothers, 2 sisters' names, one after the other, and he told me my name. How is that? How is it? I don't know what the rest of the information was. That's what mediumship is all about, giving information. But whether, I mean, it's no good just giving names and telling you what your name is. A picture has to be built, and other information has to come in to make it more worthwhile. People from the spirit world, how they died, where they live. This is how it is for me. But all mediums are different, aren't they? And we all have our favourites, don't we? Now, my favourite medium, you didn't ask that, did you?
No.
Telepathically, you did. It was a lady called Ursula Roberts.
Oh, right, yeah.
Who was an absolutely excellent medium. She's now no longer with us, but she was very, very specific, and probably the best medium I've ever seen work.
But why would you say she was the best? In terms of she was coming up with a lot of accurate information?
Right. More than that, though, you know yourself, if a medium's working with you, it's not just, even though it appears to be a vague message that's being given to you, something transpires between a medium and the recipient of the message that only you and the recipient will know and feel. And an onlooker might say, well, it was vague, but the recipient might see other things. Now, she was able to give specific details. My mother was a medium. My father was part Jewish and died in 1970, but she was able to give me all the details of his family and his middle name, our surname. He had a funny middle name, and everything about his family details, which was quite good. She didn't know me.
Right, right. It's just going back to what you said a little bit earlier when you were saying you need to have fillers. You know, you need to have
That's entertainment, though, isn't it? I mean, I look at upon mediumship in a theatre as partly entertainment. Wouldn't work for me if it wasn't, because mediumship is quite serious, and I do respect the people in the audience who have suffered a bereavement. But there's so much going on in the psyche of a medium. It's not normal. And to go home, it's not normal. I'm not normal. But to go home with all this information in your head sometimes is very unhealthy. And the thing you should be suspicious of, ladies and gentlemen, if you frequent a medium on a regular basis, mediums who remember messages they gave 2 years ago or even 12 months ago are either not genuine or there's something radically wrong. You know that?
No, I didn't know. I was going to add to this. So it's interesting. I had a conversation with a very, very, very well-known medium. Has had a lot of success, written a number of books. And he said to me, off the record, he said, Kieran, any medium that says to you that they don't use cold reading is lying.
Yeah, well, I agree.
And his argument was, kind of along your lines, is that what do you do about the silence? Is that there may be times when messages don't come through, or when it's not clear, or when you're trying to build up some sort of rapport. And he said, for that reason, he said, some mediums, and even at the various training colleges, will be taught techniques, and they won't be labelled as cold reading, but that's essentially what they are. You know, they're building up on vagueness and ambiguity. And he said, we learn those because there is nothing worse than standing on a stage and just getting silence when there's all these expectant faces staring at you, and so you need to fill with something. And that's what he said, and you were admitting it. But now can you understand, as a scientist, and for any skeptic sitting in the audience, how hard it is now, when we hear this, and when we know about cold reading techniques, to then accept the other parts of the messages that you say, well, that's not cold reading. You know, it's very difficult, isn't it? And that comes down to what you said before, this idea of it's subjective.
See, I'm a bit loath to use the term cold reading, as you know that. But, I mean, I've said this to you today. There are thousands of mediums and clairvoyants today. There are far more today than there were 25 years ago. They can't all be genuine. And it's a very easy way of making money. And I know many clairvoyants who make a lot of money from it and who are not genuine. You can set yourself up as a clairvoyant, learn the art of cold reading, and have a little bit of psychology and a little bit of personality. As long as people like you, they don't listen half the time to what you say to them. So it's very easy to become a clairvoyant. But I have to add quickly that not all clairvoyants are mediums, and not all mediums are clairvoyant. Mediumship works independently of all these, and a medium who has the ability to see spirit people is a clairvoyant medium. But a person who reads a crystal ball or palmistry or tarot cards may also be clairvoyant, but can only tell you about your future, events that are going to happen in the future. I think it's very unhealthy, and I find it a bit distasteful now, more than I did 20 years ago. Very uncomfortable with it, because mediums are very vulnerable people, and even the genuine ones have to be on guard, because they get people like Karen and other psychologists and parapsychologists, and students of parapsychology who will shoot them down and sit in an audience and smirk and fidget and huff and puff.
That's actually, we're just speculating, because there are a few faces that I recognise, and I know that there are a couple of psychologists here, but a few, like a handful. Can I ask now, truthfully, maybe we should ask about belief? Yeah, just a show of hands. I'm just intrigued, because we don't know what sort of audience we're dealing with. If we do this again, we'd like to get a kind of a taste of what sort of belief, what should we say, belief in the paranormal?
Can I start a bit? How many people attend a spiritualist church? Put your hands up. How many people are interested in mediums and have had a reading from a medium?
Wow.
It's got a high. And now, how many psychology students in the audience?
There's no students. How many psychology lecturers?
Oh, there you go. I knew you were. I don't think I've met you, have I?
No.
But I mean, it's the face that gives it away, isn't it? I thought I'd just try a few things on you. Sorry?
Lack of sleep as well.
Yes.
Lack of sleep.
Anyway, but we've got a point really.
But we haven't asked about belief. You asked about mediumship. How many people believe in the paranormal? Okay. Would you say that's about half? It looks to be about half, doesn't it? Yeah. But just show that some people won't decide. Do that again. How many people believe in the paranormal?
And how many people?
More than half, I would say.
How many people in the
75%.
audience have actually had a paranormal experience, even just one? Are there any mediums in the audience? One there.
Can I try a little cold reading? Do you mind?
If you want.
Is that all right?
If you want, go on.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so if I just do a couple of minutes and then we'll have a chat.
You've only got 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. It's just because in the break a couple of people were saying, yeah, Billy was impressive. At the end of the day, you keep talking about cold reading, but put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. So I'm going to try it. Right. It doesn't always work. Messages don't always come through. Okay. This is not so much. I don't think I'm going to focus on in terms of getting messages from spirits, but I am getting a flash in terms of, and I'm going to start off vaguely, upheaval. So there's somebody going through a move at the moment. There's a big movement going on at the moment, and it's either, in fact, it's two things. It's a move, and it's a move physically, like a house move or that sort of thing, but also kind of a relationship move, or as a result of a relationship. It's that sort of. So is anybody going through that sort of upheaval at the moment? Anybody?
That's it.
No sort of upheaval? Okay, we've got two here. Can I borrow your mic? I know I'm going to be a minute. So, going through an upheaval. Are you moving house at the moment, or?
I have moved down.
You have moved. You've already moved. Okay, it's not you. Because what I'm getting is Pickford space. I'm getting literally that the move is going on at the moment. And there was a lady back there who had her hand up as well. So we'll ask you, and if you said you already moved, then that's the end of my reading. Okay, here we go. Have you moved, or?
Next week.
You're moving next week. Okay. And also I was saying about an upheaval in a relationship. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make sense. Okay. Let me go back down here. An upheaval in a relationship, an upheaval movement. Okay, let's move away a little bit from that sort of thing. I don't want to embarrass you anyway in terms of personal stuff. I want you to imagine now, let's try some sort of psychic connection. I want you to imagine that you are at somebody else's house. You're going through an upheaval, a move at the moment. Imagine you're at somebody else's house, a family member's house, right? I'm getting I'm getting the name Michael. I don't know if that's a relative or if that's maybe to do with the house or the street name. Michael. You look at me, are you nodding your head, or does that make sense?
Yeah.
It makes sense in terms of Michael. Is it the person? Are we dealing with a relative here, or is it something to do with the house? Relative, okay. Because I'm getting a street. I'm getting a street something.
I used
Michael?
to live on Carmichael Street.
Oh, right. Okay, well, I didn't realise that, but a huge hit. You're at this house, right? Let's imagine you're at this house. There's a house on Carmichael Street. Now, who lives there? Does somebody live there in this house?
Yeah.
Your dad lives there. Okay. Close your eyes now, and you can nod and agree or shake your head and say, no, you're absolute rubbish. You're at this house now. You're looking at the front of the house. Okay? And watch you very carefully now how you react. You're at the front of the house. Presumably this is a terraced house?
Yeah.
Small, oh, okay. Thank you. A gate. There's a gate at the front.
Yeah.
I want to say, no, it's an iron gate. An iron gate, I think. A little path. That's kind of a standard thing. Now you're standing at the front door. There's no window in. It's just a all blocked off door. Okay. So walk in. Now let's get to the living room, right? Just go to the living room. You're in the living room. Imagine your dad sitting there. Okay, I don't know his name, but imagine he's sitting there. You're in the room. It's carpeted. Living room's carpeted. Brilliant. Okay. You're looking around. There's a fireplace, or at least actually it's not a big ornate fire. It's just a little gas. There's a gas fire there. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. She was shaking her head when I was going, ornate fireplace. I thought, okay, electric fire or gas fire. There's a picture of you in this room, a framed picture of you. Not now, it's when you're younger. Is that right?
Yeah.
A picture just of you. Oh no, not just of you. You and somebody else. Have you got any sisters? Yeah, you and your sister, and it's possibly when you're at school or some other happy moment in your life. Does that make sense? Okay. Your dad is sitting there. Your dad is sitting there. I want to say pipe smoke, but that doesn't make any sense. Is your dad a smoker?
Yeah.
I have to ask that, sorry. Okay, because I'm smelling, yeah, he's a smoker, and he rolls his own. He doesn't just buy cigarettes. Is that right? Does he roll his own? Okay. Okay. Doesn't roll his own. There's something unusual about him rolling his cigarettes. I don't know if it's the way he does it, or if it's the papers he uses, or something a little bit different. It's not. There's something unusual about the rolling. Why are you laughing? Does that make sense? Can you take that, love? Can you? Something unusual about it, and I think it's the papers. There's something about the papers, okay? And the last thing, and then I'll hand back and Billy will rip me apart. The last thing, let's go back out the living room, right? And as if you're walking out. When you go out the living room and walk out, do you just walk straight into a corridor and out the front? You know, or is there a doorway to get into the corridor?
There's no corridor, it's just straight through.
Okay. But actually, you're in the corridor now, and it's pitch black. It's really dark in that corridor. There's something about that's very strange. When you walk into that corridor, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the way the doors are arranged. When you're in that corridor, it's very dark, and there's a little room before you then exit again, like a little front room with washing and various other things. Who knows what's in there? But there's something about that corridor. It's just very dark. No windows, I guess. Simple as that. No windows in the door and everything like that. Okay, can you take all of that? Is that all right for you? Yes? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
Don't ask me.
What am I going to say now? I just have to do it. People were saying, "Come on, you know, you should give it a go."
Although I can say you've been on the Empire with me next year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Can I just answer a couple of questions here?
Yeah, of course.
Do you want to ask me?
No. You can ask them.
About, it was quite good, that, wasn't it? Yeah. Good. Somebody, first of all, I might have said this earlier on. Mediumship is not normal, is it? It's been found that there is an abnormality in the brain. And somebody's asked me here, I couldn't really understand the question. Can you actually see your crossed over loved ones as you sleep via your dreams, or are they or just flash images? Would you like to believe in them? I don't understand this. For me personally, though, they're not flash images. When the mediumistic demonstration works, they're quite clear and specific, and the information is specific. When they're not, they're incoherent and confused. Now, an awful lot of people have experiences in the hypnagogic state when you're actually falling asleep. You know, most people, when they're overtired, will have a feeling of somebody's calling their name, or minute pictures passing through their consciousness. This is to do with the endocrine glands and the nerve plexuses. And there is something, if you experience anything like that, then potentially you have mediumistic abilities. Would you believe that?
No.
Right. I knew you wouldn't.
The reason why I just have one quick addition to that. If you're talking about people lying in bed asleep and getting imagery and maybe seeing things, we've talked about this hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, this in-between state in between waking and sleeping. And we know as psychologists and neuropsychologists that you can mix that dream imagery even though your eyes are open. You actually see some of your dream imagery. So it's very difficult for me when you say that.
But I'm talking about something specific, particularly when you're overtired. I mean, people who have a history of nervous disorder, people who've had nervous breakdowns, often have a propensity towards psychic experiences. And I must add that if you are interested in the paranormal and you have a history of psychological problems, you should never be involved in anything which would precipitate psychic abilities, because it can overload your nervous system and cause all kinds of problems. So there are implications in mediumistic development. So although we're all potentially mediums, it wouldn't do for everybody to embark upon this great adventure and develop your psychic skills. I don't think so.
Shall we end with the last question?
Yeah, give it to me.
I was going to say, what would it take, and I'm spinning a question that I get asked a lot, and you can ask me the same question, but in a different way. What would it take for you not to believe?
In what?
In mediumship, in psychic ability, maybe in mediumship, if I say in mediumship.
That would be very difficult. If you're talking about belief in an afterlife, then there are times when my faith has wavered. Although mediumistic skills are inherent in the family, and I've grown up seeing so-called dead people, there are times when it's like looking at a blank wall. And without going into too much detail, it can have a sort of a detrimental effect on your emotional life. And your faith does waver. Mine does. So I'm not one who would fly the flag for mediumship and there's a better life beyond death. I'm not sure. And I always quote the Woody Allen and more recently the, what's his name? The guy from the moons.
Spike Milligan?
Spike Milligan. They were asked same question, are you afraid of dying? And they both answered, no, but I just don't want to be there when it happens. And that's exactly the way I feel. And I don't believe in the traditional concepts of heaven and hell, but I do think that I've done a lot of things in my past life, this incarnation, and I'm not really sure how many points I have, so I don't know whether I'm going up or down, so I'll delay the process of dying. So, in answer to your question, I will always believe in mediumship. It's just that I'm very skeptical of mediums in general. And it is subjective, as I've told you, and we've discussed this. It's in my consciousness, nobody else's. So I know it goes on, and I know it's real. And I'm sure other mediums know it too. So, but what about you? Because you don't believe.
So what would it take? What would it take for me to believe? That's basically the response.
To believe.
What would it take for me to believe?
In an afterlife, not when we forget mediumship. Because I don't believe you're a skeptic. I think it's part of your persona, your professional.
I think I'm just putting it on.
I think so.
It's all just a
Because
game.
we've discussed this, and you've had experiences, I know this, which we won't discuss, which he doesn't tell anybody, but we have to discuss it for the sake of the book. And he made me promise under threat of death that I wouldn't write about it, so I didn't. I respect it.
Yeah, and maybe when you do die and come back and give me messages, that's when I'll believe. But I'm a skeptic in the true sense of the word, in that I'm open-minded and I'm always questioning the evidence. And we've talked about this as well. Too often people say you're a skeptic, which means you're cynical, and that's what people think. They think I'm cynical. And yeah, at the end of the day, a lot of what I put forward, even on Most Haunted, are cynical explanations. And we've talked about some of the things that you're interested in, and I'm very cynical. Don't even get me started on astrology. But in terms of what would it take for me to believe in the afterlife, dying.
Yeah.
I'll be absolutely honest. It's maybe an awful thing to say.
People
are out there. If people are out there, with their beliefs and their religious beliefs, but I think that's what it would take for me, because I know of too many other explanations. Should I have any experiences, for example, being confronted with a relative, a departed relative, or getting a message from a medium, I know of too many other explanations for what I'm being presented with. For other things, like for ghosts, what would it take for me to believe in ghosts, for example? Yeah, if one was standing right in front of me shouting boo, but it was witnessed by somebody else and it was filmed, that would be enough for me. But it would have to be witnessed by somebody else, because, I'd hope that it wasn't my own visual hallucinations playing up. But there you go.
There's a well-known doctor in Southport, retired now. I won't say his name because he's still alive, and he's a healer, and he's also a medium. His wife wasn't, and she since passed away. And this guy was a brilliant medium and a very compassionate man. He's no longer in practice. He's a scientific mind, brilliant in academics. He had a wide range of knowledge. And also, there's a guy, one of the innovators of the polygraph, a man called Dr. Alexander Cannon, who was a notable psychiatrist in St. Thomas's Hospital. He had a castle in the Isle of Man. He used to train people. He was an occultist. And he wrote a book on levitation. And when the medical board read it, they said, "We can't have a man of your standing writing such dribble." They struck him off. And he appealed against the board, the decision. And in the appeal, he got them to open 2 windows. And he conditioned himself prior to that. He was a yogi master as well. And he levitated. It's well documented. Through one window, round to the other window.
And is it on video?
They reinstated him.
All right.
Well known. And he was a brilliant man, a brilliant mind. And
well, okay. On that note, if you were levitating out of one window back into another, then maybe I believe that.
no, you wouldn't.
But I still probably wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
But I think we're going to have to leave it there, because time is up. But I hope you've enjoyed this evening. I hope maybe you'll go away just questioning or thinking a little bit more about various aspects of the paranormal. We've only covered one part tonight, which is the mediumship and psychic part. In the book, we focus on loads of different things. Haunting experiences, we have a huge chapter on. We talk about auras, psychometry, you name it, healing as well, archetypal concepts, everything. And so I encourage you to have a look at that and see how we discuss these other aspects. But all that's left to say, I guess, is thank you very much for coming and for supporting tonight and for being here. And like we say at the end of the book, the truth is out there, but finding it is the difficult part.
Can I have the last word?
Okay.
A few thoughts have just come to me, and I'd like to leave you with them. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Cameron.
Thank you very much.